Welcome to Chromatic Counsel. I am your host, Carrie Heaps, and I have got an amazing show lined up for you today. If you are interested in being a guest and you are within the legal arena, regardless of where you're located in the United States, I would love to talk with you. You can click on the link in the show notes below to be considered as a guest. And we do talk a little bit about how you get started in your practice, some questions and some feedback and tips that you might want to share with up and coming attorneys. And of course, as always, because this is Chromatic Counsel, I do ask a couple of color questions as well. So again, you can click on the link in the show notes below. But today we have a great show lined up for you. I am today wearing green. Green, as you know, if you've taken my color of persuasion class, is the color of harmony and growth. It's a wonderful color for you to be wearing as an accent color in your tie, shirt underneath your suit, or any accessory colors. Go out and do some networking. It's a great way to get people to attract to you and get them to start that conversation. And if you are doing a mediation or you got to calm your client down a little bit, wear a lighter shade of green. The lighter, the better, the more calming the effect will be. So just a little tip there for you. Today, my guest is Mark Melton. He is the national co-chair of the Tax Executive Compensation and Benefits Practice Group for Holland and Knight, where he leads a team of more than 75 tax and ERISA lawyers. His practice focuses on complex federal income taxation issues related to domestic and cross-border mergers and acquisitions, corporate transactions, private equity and hedge funds, as well as other investment partnerships, joint ventures, and real estate investment trust and operating businesses. He's also the founder of the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center, which is actually where I connected with him. I saw a few posts on LinkedIn, and we're going to talk about that today. But that is a nonprofit law firm. It provides free legal representation to tenants facing eviction in Dallas County. His team assists more than 5,000 families facing eviction each year. His work has been featured by national news outlets, including a documentary by PBS, and acknowledged by numerous service awards, including the Pro Bono Publico Award, the highest honor given by the American Bar Association for Pro Bono Service. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you here. And I know I want to dive into so many different things with you. However, I want to, for our listening audience, if you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about you, kind of what made you choose law as a profession?
Well, it's pretty simple story. I didn't go to college until after I was married and had two kids. So I was in my early 20s. I had lost my job in Tulsa, Oklahoma after the company had done some shady accounting practices and went under and filed bankruptcy and laid off all 5,000 employees. And so we had a garage sale and sold everything we owned and packed up the kids in the car. And we just drove to Dallas one day, kind of sight unseen, and had no plan and no place to live and no job. And just thought maybe we'd have more opportunities and we could be homeless in Tulsa or we could be homeless in Dallas. And that sounded better. So we did that. Um, After some lucky interactions with a few good mentors, I ended up going to the junior college and transferred to the University of Texas at Arlington, where I got an accounting degree and a master's degree in tax while I was there. But one of the things I was doing for scholarship money was my advisor had suggested I join the moot court team for UTA. And so I ended up winning a national championship for undergraduate moot court, which really kind of stoked my interest in the law, and was fortunate enough to get into SMU's law school.
That's great. That's an interesting story. And I know starting over, I think even I was talking to someone the other day and I was telling them, I said, it's never too late to start over. Some people have to start over in their 20s and 30s. Some people have to do it in their 40s and 50s. It is everywhere. So I love that you kind of shared a little bit about that and kind of going into the unknown and making that move. Um, Let me ask you this because you're a partner in your firm, and I'm sure that you come across, maybe you mentor quite a few younger attorneys that are up and coming. What is one crucial step that you see new attorneys are overlooking that they're not doing, but maybe something they could do that would really impact their career and really help them?
There's two things that I usually tell young lawyers. The first one is um, do your work like no one's going to review it. And what I mean by that is a lot of young lawyers have this tendency to uh, do a job and maybe they're unclear, unsure, or maybe sometimes a little tired. And
Mhm.
so they will return some work product with the assumption that the partner's going to review this and they'll fix anything I missed. And so that'll be fine. I'm not that worried about it. If you're a young lawyer and you give your partner's work that is complete and done correctly so that there are fewer marks, right? You're going to look better and progress faster in your career, and you're just doing better lawyering at that point. The second thing that a lot of young lawyers neglect to do is networking early. If you wait until you're eligible to make partner to start networking and building um, any kind of client book, you're way late to the game. And so I tell all the young lawyers that work for me that they need to be out in the community. They need to be networking with their peers through the Young Lawyers Bar Associations, because someday, those people, a lot of them are going to leave private practice and go in house, and they'll be doling out engagements. And the more of those types of people that you know for a long time and have a relationship and some trust built, the more times they're going to call you. And so that way, 10 years from your start date, you already have a built-in network that you've cultivated for a decade. And when it's time to start originating business, you've already done the groundwork, and it's a much faster process.
Mhm. I love both of these. And I just jotted down a quick note because checking your work, and I see so much on LinkedIn, and I think you probably do too, from attorneys who are coming up with, their cases that they're trying and where the other attorneys are using like Chat GPT to create, their motions and so forth. And I guess they're not double checking that, and there's errors there. Are you seeing more of a rise in that nowadays? Is Chat GPT playing a role in that?
I mean, I not really. I have one case that's a pro bono case against a pro se litigant, and he clearly uses ChatGPT because his pleadings are nonsense. But I don't run into that in any kind of professional setting. And to be fair, I'm not a litigator. I'm a transactional tax lawyer, so
Mhm.
I don't get to see a whole lot of briefs outside of our eviction work. But we obviously don't use ChatGPT to draft briefs. To the extent we're using AI at all, it's to search documents to make sure section references aren't missing and the defined terms are actually in the document and required, and those kinds of tedious type of checks and balances on the document. It's not writing anything.
Mhm. And with networking, because I love that you brought that up. I've been hearing from a lot of attorneys that tell me, they're like, hey, when we go through law school, they're not talking to us about the building connections or about the quote unquote selling part of law, especially if they go out on their own and they feel, I think, a little, I don't want to say intimidated, but they're just not sure where to start. When you talk about networking, do you feel it's more beneficial to network just with other attorneys or network with the, like, joining a chamber and maybe trying to generate your own business? Or are you talking about both? Do you feel both would be beneficial?
I think both are important. I mean, the more networking you can do, the more successful you're going to be.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing I tell young lawyers and sometimes old lawyers is, especially when you get to be an equity partner in a law firm, or if you're on your own, right? Your first job is a salesperson of legal services, and your second job is to be a lawyer.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't think about it like that. They think I'm just a professional and I'm a lawyer and I don't need to be a salesman. But in order to be a salesman, you got to be a salesman, and
Mhm.
you got to do the things salespeople do, and you got to understand that like in any sales cycle, right? There's an average of 15 to 17 touches before you make a sale, and so you've got to constantly be out there meeting people and shaking hands and having lunch or drinks or whatever it is you're doing,
Mhm.
so that you're staying in front of people and in front of mind, and then demonstrating your competency out there. So I think it's important to network with your peer lawyers because they're great referral sources, especially as they go in house as they get older.
Mhm.
But also in the business community. So, because those people people obviously also need legal services. And so chambers are good. All the big nonprofits have young professionals groups. So I encourage my lawyers to, pick something that's near and dear to your heart and then go get involved. And while you're there, join a committee.
Mhm.
Don't just have your name on the list. Go actually be active and participate. It'll make your networking much more effective because if you just go to one happy hour and you hand out some business cards, by the next morning you forgot everyone you met and they all forgot you.
Yeah.
So you got to go back every month and become a regular. So then you kind of join the core nucleus of the group and become known. And that's how you foster those relationships that later will pay off for you.
And I think community involvement in general is such a huge thing. Even, kind of putting the networking aside, but even like for volunteering, I always encourage people find something that speaks to you, speaks to your soul. If it complements your firm, then great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Talk to me a little bit about the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center, because that's actually where I connected with you, because I think we're connected on LinkedIn and you had shared a couple of videos and I went to the page, I was looking at it, and I actually went through the very first video. It was a pretty in-depth one that you had posted and I watched it all the way through. And I'll be honest, it got to me. It made me pretty emotional. And I think what you're doing is so unbelievably important. And I think you're there in Dallas, and I think every city should have something similar. But talk to me a little bit about that. What prompted you to start this?
Well, it wasn't intentional, that's for sure. At the beginning of the pandemic was just posting things on social media that were relevant to the pandemic, like here are the stay-at-home orders, and this is what they mean. And I've got pretty close political connections to various people around Dallas, and so the mayor would call or the county judge would call and say, "We just issued an order. Can you help us push it out? Here's what we really meant." And so I had a little insider information, and so I was just sharing things on social media. One of those things was about a moratorium on evictions in the middle of March of 2020. And I just posted it thinking nothing of it, and it went viral. And before I knew it, I was spending 20 hours a day, taking phone calls and emails and social media and everything else, trying to answer people's questions because it had just been told you can't go to work, but the rent's still due in 2 weeks. So they wanted to know, how does this moratorium affect me?
Mhm.
And so, after about a week of that, we decided we needed some help. And so, at my wife's urging, and so we set up a email and a phone number and a website, and we called it Dallas Evictions 2020 because I thought this is a 6 week project and we'll be done. And so I asked some other lawyers to help me out, and for the next 10 months, people would reach out. They would go to my wife's laptop. She would send them to the next lawyer in the queue, and then that lawyer would help that person. And we recruited about 250 volunteer lawyers, and we helped about 6,500 families navigate the eviction rules through the pandemic for that first year. In early 2021, everybody started kind of suffering from some vicarious trauma, and we were having trouble staffing cases and getting volunteers to be able to drop everything and go to court. And so we decided we needed staff lawyers that were really focused on this work if we were going to be successful with it. So that year, I hired the first lawyer in March, and I hired another lawyer in July. And during the calendar year of 2021, the three of us litigated 853 eviction cases, and we won 96% of them. And so it occurred to me as we were debriefing for the year that the problem was that there's just this massive culture of noncompliance in the landlord community. And so no one was following the rules. We were winning all those cases because if you walked into a courtroom, and this is what we would do, we would just walk in, we're not cherry picking cases. I would just stand up in the front of the room and say, "I'll represent every tenant in this room." And as they would walk up for the docket call, I don't even know their name. And I would just turn around to the landlord and say, "All right, Texas law requires that you give a notice and you give it in a certain way. Did you do that?" And 96% of the time, they couldn't prove that they did. A lot of times they just didn't, right? Because historically, tenants are represented at less than 1 to 3% of the time, and so there was never anyone there holding anyone accountable. And so you could walk in and do it right and get an eviction, or you could walk in and not do any of the things the law requires and still get an eviction. And so why would you go to the trouble? So, part of our theory has been since then something we call saturation theory. And the idea is to saturate all 10 JP courts in Dallas County with highly trained defense lawyers that represent every tenant in the room, so that we can change that percentage of representation from 1 to 3% to 100%. Because even though there were 38,000 evictions filed last year, approximately, we don't need to be in 38,000 places at one time because all of those cases have to go through one of those 10 JP courts. So we just need to be in 10 places at one time. And so that's what we've been working towards, is getting to a staffing level where we can do that. And as of today, we've got about 20 full-time employees, and we handle around 500 eviction cases a month.
Wow, that is amazing. You know, and anybody who's in Dallas or who's listening that is in Texas or close to your area, Mark, if they want to, if they're not an attorney and they want to get involved in your organization, are there other opportunities to volunteer besides, being an attorney? Because like I saw in the video, there were people helping other people move. I think you were doing that too in the video. And are there other opportunities for people who want to help that are in Dallas?
I mean, the unfortunate answer is not really. I think a lot of nonprofits spend a lot of time thinking about how do you engage, people in the public. And a lot of it's forced, and it's not really that in depth or helpful. They're just trying to do it for engagement's sake.
Mhm.
Uh, our MO here is to skip all of that kind of stuff and just get to the point. Occasionally we have a tenant that we need to help move, and we'll put out a call on social media, and people will just show up or donate beds or furniture or whatever. It's kind of ad hoc. But the real answer is what we need is money, right? Because I've got to raise $3 million every year to do all this work for free on behalf of the people, and that's the real answer, right? And unless you got a law degree, the only thing we do is represent tenants in courtrooms, right? So
Mhm.
there's really nothing for anyone else to do.
Gotcha. Well, definitely, if there are attorneys in the Dallas area that are listening, they can connect with you if that, is an option. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask one of my most favorite questions that I love to ask during this show, and this has to do with color. And I'm just wondering, I don't know how often you actually go to court. I mean, it sounds like you may not go that often, or if you're doing, mediation or, arbitration, maybe. Do you have a favorite go-to color or go-to outfit that you're like, wow, this is kind of like things go well when I wear this suit? Do you have anything like that?
Oh, sure. No, and I do spend, especially the last few years, a lot of time in courtrooms. We don't believe in mediation or arbitration for these cases. The only thing that these landlords understand is going into a courtroom and losing. And
Mhm.
so that's the only way to hold people accountable. And so that's what we do. But, I am typically wearing a dark navy suit. Um, on most days, it's probably a blue tie with a pocket square. If it's a big case where I just really want to throw my weight around, I will put on a red tie with a red pocket square. But those are for the times that I intentionally want to walk in and be extremely intimidating.
Got it. Good to know. And just in closing, I would love for you to share, is there anything that you want to share with the listening audience, whether, anything you have coming up with with the Advocacy Center, the Eviction Advocacy Center, or even with your own firm, anything at all that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, we're still growing, so we're trying to get to full saturation. So we're making a lot of progress. So we are hiring right now. So if there are lawyers in Dallas that are looking for some public service work, we'd be interested in having a chat. Um, I think the thing that is probably for wider consumption really is just the idea that the rule of law is a myth. Constitutional rights aren't real. All these notions that people have about the law and all these things, they're just fake news. The reality is, if you go to a JP court without a lawyer, the likelihood that you find the right answer is extremely low. So unrepresented tenants win their cases 25% of the time on a good day. We get good results for our clients over the last 4 months, we've won about 75% of the time. So you were 3 times more likely to get the right answer with a lawyer than without. And you got to keep in mind, these are courts that were invented so that you didn't need to have a lawyer to find justice, right? They're literally called justice courts. And two lay people are supposed to be able to walk in there, and the judge is supposed to be able to develop the facts and find the right answer and then dispense justice. And that is clearly not happening unless there is a lawyer in the room. And so lawyers matter. For people that do have law degrees, we get to wake up every day and we get to survey our world and we get to decide whether we're going to help somebody solve their problem. And, that's tantamount to being able to answer a prayer. And if you've got that kind of power, that you're the one who gets to decide whether someone's prayer is going to get answered, that's a pretty big responsibility that I think we've got to take really seriously.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, I really appreciate your time today. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and just talking about everything that you're doing. Keep doing it. I mean, you're bringing, I think, so much hope just to the people that are in the Dallas area that, really need it. So I will have there's a link in the show notes too. So if you want to connect and talk to Mark a little bit more about what he's doing and see how you can help, you can click on the link below. But again, thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to thank everyone for being on the show today, for tuning in. I hope you got some value out of what we shared. And again, if you want to join us and come on the show, we would love to have you. Just click on the link in the show notes below. And as always, I am wishing you continued success. And always remember, life is too short. Wear bright colors.